joining us remotely for today's conversation. Let's welcome a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. Is the president of the National Association of Nigerian Traders. That's Dr. Ken Ukoha. Dr. Ukoha, it's our pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very, very much, Kinsley.
Okay. We also have with us in the studios Anthony Ayalogu, Controller of Trade Facilitation and Preferential Trade at the Nigeria Customs Service. Controller Ayalogu, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Shoaibu Idris is the Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited. He joins us from our Sokoto studio. Welcome to the program.
Good morning and good morning, Nigerians. Thanks for having me once again.
And also for this discussion is Femi Boyede, a certified international trade professional and president, Nigeria Trade and Investment Center, Canada Incorporated. Thank you for joining us via Zoom all the way from Canada.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians. I appreciate your having me on the program today.
I don't know what the time is in that part of the world, but we're glad that you're able to join us this morning.
All right. Thanks a lot, Femi Boyede. It's been a while since we had you on Good Morning Nigeria. And by the way, Kyria, let's also especially appreciate Shoaibu Idris, the regular on Good Morning Nigeria. And perhaps we should now say that he's our roving analyst because he can be with us at our Lagos Network Center, Kaduna Network Center. Today he's at the Sokoto Network Center. Shoaibu Idris, of course, a former banker and financial analyst, we appreciate your taking our time for today's conversation. So back to the studios where we also have two guests that we have introduced, beginning with the Controller Trade Facilitation and Preferential Trade of the Nigeria Customs Service. The immediate background to our conversation is the complaint by many key players that the Nigeria Customs Service places more emphasis on revenue generation rather than trade facilitation, and that the emphasis on revenue generation turns around to hurt businesses and ultimately the consumers, and that if the customs were to focus more on trade facilitation, the government in fact will have more revenue. Why are we having this situation?
First of all, we need to understand trade facilitation as a concept that looks at procedures and controls that eliminates time and costs. And already the World Trade Organization has set articles and high principles to be followed in order to achieve this. And it covers areas like transparency, cooperation. We talk about harmonization, and these has all been taken down by the World Customs Organization, and the tools to implement this have been formulated on that level. In Nigeria, we have tried as much as possible to reorganize our procedures, redefine them, create within our processes implementation strategies that would allow us to maximally facilitate trade without subverting the statutory rules of Nigerian customs.
How do you mean?
So, you see, to get trade facilitation, we could just, the other end, it could be just open the borders and everybody comes in, and that's maximum trade facilitation. The other end is also trying to collect revenue, collect rate, and also control the movement of goods in and out of the country. This is at both ends. But you see, at that time, we need to look at, are we fencing Nigeria around to be able to do that? We have to make sure that Nigeria trade is facilitated, and also that we're able to collect necessary revenues, and also that controls are given so that security is not, we have security, we have other things that controls will have done. We don't need to shift to one side of it and then lose the other. All our procedures that we have devised in order to create high trade facilitation environment is taking care of maximizing trade facilitation and maximizing the other functions that also put monies to the government and also ensure security and other factors.
Actually, the question really borders on the fact that more emphasis is being laid on revenue generation, because annually we hear from Customs Service that Customs has generated so amount of money, but we rarely hear much of what you've just explained, in terms of ensuring that the Customs Service is actually playing its role perfectly. So this issue of raising the issue of revenue is the problem, and again, not just at the borders or at the ports, even on the highways, you tend to see custom of officers along the highways, and one wonders what they are doing there, because if they are looking for contraband goods, for instance, these goods ought to have been stopped at the border or at the entry points of the country. And so on. So that is why they complain. So perhaps you could go further to let our viewers understand the real issues here, because of course we raised this matter this morning because of the complaints, and it's indeed enormous.
Yes, Korean. It's it's not as stereotype as you say it. It's not that very straight. As we in Customs have done a lot to make sure that the time, like I said before, reduce the time in process and reduce the cost in process. And when we look at the activities of Customs over time, we have found that we have gone a long way. We have, it's no more, when we used to have a long room, it's no more a long room. It's now a digital interface between Customs and the declarant. We have also made sure that all the points where goods are coming from Nigeria are interconnected digitally, so that those times that you have moved from one point to the other are also reduced. We also ensure that, like we have in the inspection agents of the other time, when people have to move from VI to different areas in space and also in time to be able to do a process. This is no more there now. You do it at the closet of your office, make declaration, make assessments, and pay duties. Yes, while we do that, we also know that we know the importance of trade facilitation. It is a very cardinal point from WCO. All Customs Administration must implement trade facilitation, and we are doing it maximally to the level we can. But we also know that we need to also control, we need also to collect, and we need also to collate trade. And so what is dutiable, duties must be paid. We will not, on the grounds of trade facilitation, stop duties to be paid. We need this money, we need this control, because it's not only about getting monies for government or income for government, it's about controlling trade so industries will survive. If you allow foreign trade to come in on the grounds of trade facilitation, it will kill our local industries. We need also, as we control them, we need also to develop also what other measures that we need to do in trying to make sure that this time and this cost are removed. Just like I said, the money as we are doing that, we are collecting this revenue, and this revenue is also getting to government, and government is also doing a lot for the people. We understand that trade facilitation and revenue collections sometimes do not go on the same side, but we have to meet at a point. And meeting at a point is making sure that we protect we customize the economic policies for our country and also maximize the trade facilitation strategies that we have put in place.
All right. Thank you very much, Comptroller Anthony Ayalog. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. I'm tempted to go to Femi Boyede, who is with us via Zoom. He was introduced a while ago. Femi Boyede, for some years, you also served as a technical assistant in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. And we know that trade is one area that you're very passionate about. Now, tell us, are we striking the right balance between the Customs Service as a revenue-generating agency and what it also ought to be, namely a trade facilitator? If we're not, why?
Thank you very much. And first, let me start by commending the Nigeria Customs Service through the controller. The mere fact that we now have the office of a controller trade facilitation, I'm sure is an empirical evidence that we have started to move in the right direction. However, I am worried still about the understanding of what our customs service should be all about. In the introductory overview, you mentioned, or the correspondent actually mentioned, the desirability of subjugating revenue generation. We mentioned the issue of customs having revenue targets. That, for me, points to the fact that we need a complete 360 degrees change of mentality. WCO, World Customs Organization, defines trade facilitation, or understands trade facilitation to mean the avoidance of unnecessary trade restrictiveness by applying modern techniques and technologies while improving the quality of controls in an internationally harmonized manner. In that definition, as deep and comprehensive as it is, I have not seen the word revenue come up at all. And my position has always been kind of to query, for example, the desirability of setting revenue targets for customs. That tends to mean that the customs service is there, and I know a time in the past when national budget was actually a part of, not a part, a good component of national budget was expected to be funded by revenue generated by the Nigerian Customs Service. And you know what this means immediately is that, okay, now that we are a member of the West Africa Customs Union and playing our role there, the CET already agrees that raw materials are going to come into West Africa because they are coming in for improvement of industrial capacity. Raw materials and machinery and all of those things come in at maybe a 5% maximum customs duty. But finished products come in at anything from 20% to as high as sometimes 65, 75% duty plus development levies. And this is what generates revenue that customs goes out to say they have exceeded their revenue target. Thus, we end up encouraging Nigeria to be a dumping ground for finished goods from other countries instead of the opposite way around. And I'm sure that Ken will be helping to talk about this. That's the national president. I'm so excited to see you on this program. The second point I want to make in this, my introductory intervention, is the fact that I coordinate, I convened and coordinate a program, a monthly program called Talking Trade with Femi Boyede. And our last but one, I'm talking of the November edition of Talking Trade, we had the AGOA specialists from the West Africa Trade and Investment Hub confirming our fear that even up till now, almost 21 or 22 years after AGOA has been instituted, which is also, I think, one of the direct jurisdiction of our controller here this morning, that they are still having problem identifying or relating with Nigeria Customs Service with a designated signatory. Now, as big as the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act is, which is also a similarity, an identical trade opportunity with the AFCFTA, we do not yet have a designated long-term long-term signature to the AGOA visa, textile visa. That means that if AFCFTA is also going to take off now, and we're going to require to deal with a specified designated officer, we are not prepared yet. These are the ingredients of trade facilitation. Yes, in the course of facilitating trade, you are going to generate revenue. In shortening the long room concept, which we recognize is no longer there, you are able to accelerate. And when you accelerate the clearing process, whether it is of import or of export, then you are able to do a business of turnover. And when you do turnover, the revenue generating aspect indirectly follows. It's a logical byproduct. And so you can actually do it without, if you like, without depending or without focusing your effort on how much revenue. Again, to round this part up, as long as the Nigeria Customs Service is going to be a revenue target source center, it is going to encourage the importation of finished goods ahead of raw materials for local production, and it is going to continue to, if you like, have a lesser attention to export, facilitating export. Today, the Nigerian exporter will complain that I had the experience sometime last year that they were not able to, goods got into the 100 meters to the port. They're not able to ship out goods for 4 or 5 months.
Well, I think we've lost that line, but of course we'll get back to him because it's been very clear, from the beginning. All right, let's return to the studio, and of course bring in Dr. Ukoha here. When you talk about trade facilitation, we are in your domain. Apart from asking you to let us get your view about the operations of Customs Service, it's just important for me to note here that we also like to know how has this complaint against this Customs Service heightened challenges to trade in Nigeria on issues of undue delays, weak application of technology as it were, arbitrariness in valuation, the uncertainty of international trade transactions, and cost escalation?
Thank you very much. I think I would prefer to start from putting some historical perspective on the concept of trade facilitation. It will help us to understand very well what the Nigerian Customs Service is doing, and whether they are doing it rightly and correctly, or whether there are gaps, and then their role also in terms of facilitating two ends of trade. Because most times when we talk about trade facilitation, we are looking specifically, and this is erroneous, specifically on facilitation of trade that comes in. Now, the concept of trade facilitation started in 1996 with the introduction of this very notorious, in quote, Singapore issues. There are 4 fingers we call Singapore issues, namely investment, policy, architecture into the WTO multilateral trading system negotiations. 2, government procurement, which became a very serious headache to the extent that you have to expose all your, international dealings, or your dealings, rather, at the international space in terms of whether you want to procure whatever you want to procure, you put it there at the international domain. And then most of our people here, domestic, operators, do not have the muscle, the financial muscle and the capacity to also negotiate and draw some benefits from that. The third one is the subject of trade facilitation, which had to do with moving trade between one country and another, making sure that it is seamless, in quote. Now, I want to come into the subject of trade facilitation and what it means. It means specifically and stricto sensu the implementation of trade policy. That is what it is. And what is the role of the customs? The role of the customs officer is to implement the trade policy. Therefore, if you look at what trade facilitation means and what the custom is supposed to be, it means that absolutely the custom officer is the trade facilitator, the gatekeeper. But are there not other agencies involved in trade facilitation? Is it only the customs? No. 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 And that's why most times in Nigeria here and in most places in sub-Saharan Africa, we always knock at the doors of customs when we're talking about trade facilitation. Wrong. The Export Promotion Committee, Council, Commission, whatever, is also a trade facilitator. Investment Promotion Agency, Authority, whatever, is also a trade facilitator. In fact, the key trade facilitator is the ministry responsible for trade and investment and industry. In other climes, you also see the Ministry of Agriculture, because they produce all what you want to facilitate in terms of raw materials, be it agriculture produce or even solid minerals. They are all involved as trade facilitators. But I think the irony is that we have left everything to the customs. And I think that's why we are where we are, running around the circle. Number 2, just like Femi Boyede said, here we are. Next month is January. From the 1st of January now, every economic operator, not only the trader, every businessman in this country is waiting for the announcement of the budget. Those who want to import finished goods are waiting. Those who want to import raw materials they are waiting. Those who want to transact businesses in terms of, fund capital movement, they are also waiting. The entire sphere of the economy is waiting for the budget reading. You know why? Because they are looking at, 1, what target has been given to customs. 2, what is the tariff structure? And that is very, very absolutely wrong. You keep the entire economy into that very myopic, I'm sorry to use that word, cave called target. In any case, when we're talking about target setting, do we blame the customs? I'm not here as I'm a lawyer, but not holding brief for them. Who sets the target? Who gives them that target? Who confuses them? It is the government that says that. And I also think that the parliament ought to have come in, because the subject of budget starts from them. They are the ones in charge of appropriation. And therefore, they ought to know that, listen, customs would need not to be deceived into this target setting that makes them feel everywhere is money. Get it, pursue it, chase it, get that money. And in the process of getting to meet their target, some of those ones who were not well trained, who are not specialists in trade facilitation, who do not know the items, the requirements of trade facilitation, some of them go out of their way, even intimidating genuine traders, harassing genuine traders. Sometimes we have had reports of sexual harassment and all of that. Well, that's not the subject of today. However, I think that the starting point is where the target setting starts. It removes that badge of a trade facilitator from them and gives them the emblem on the forehead as a revenue collector. By the way, the role of the customs, is it only revenue collection and trade facilitation? No. No. The customs, according to the World Trade Organizations, in fact, Article 8 of the GATT that brought in them, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, explained there are two other ones that we have always lost. One is a regulator. You know why they call them a regulator? Because you use tariff to regulate the economy. If you don't want rice to come in, you use tariff. For instance, today rice is at 35%. Therefore, Nigeria does not want unwholesome importation of rice. And it kicks that particular tariff. By the way, Femi mentioned, our tariff system. Our tariff nomenclature is 0, 5%, 10%, 20%, and 35%, and that's the peak. Every other thing on it are levies or taxes. Now, if you now say, okay, I hope I'm not going to...
let me go. We're talking about two that we've talked about, regulator.
The other one...
Yeah, let's say we can...
The other one is enforcer. Now, and this role is very strategic. You know why? Because, take for instance, today we are having serious problems of insecurity. As the gatekeepers, they are the ones that see whether it is small arms or light weapons that come in. They are not the military, but they are the ones that see it first. They are the ones that would trigger the flash, the alarm. And then that's their role, to say this is prohibited. And they will enforce it. They will do what? Impound it. So, these 4 items that are key roles, and 3 have been downplayed all this while. Why? Because of target setting, wrongly.
Okay. Dr. Ken Ukoha, thank you very much for the insight that you have provided. Let's just clarify this for the benefit of our viewers. Those who are regular watchers of Good Morning Nigeria, you would have noticed that on Monday, we discussed enhancing Nigeria's agricultural export, produce export. We had the quarantine services. Kieran, you and I were not on set together on that occasion. We were discussing, precisely to say, look, how do you ensure that Nigeria's produce get the appropriate visas now to the target countries? And yesterday, we had the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, who was our guest, talking about the road shows that have been embarked upon by Nigeria and participation in various fairs and expos on the heels, of course, of the Dubai Expo 2020. All of that, of course, related to enhancing trade, enhancing productivity in industry, and so on and so forth. And today we are focusing essentially on the role of customs, taking on that greater role of trade facilitation. Just to put it in context, Dr. Ken Ukoha, who's a lawyer, and also, of course, had his doctorate in international economic law. Let's bring in now Shuaibu Idris from our network center in Sokoto. Shuaibu, of course, you've listened to the other guests. Just throw the floor open and say, look, take it from whichever perspective you wish.
Thank you very much for that liberty, Kingsley. First and foremost, I will 100% align my thoughts with Femi Boyede in commending the Nigerian customs for even having a DEX and a controller of that seniority to handle trade facilitation. I think Dr. Ken also did a lot of justice as far as the subject matter is concerned, with a bit of reservation when it comes to issue of target setting. First and foremost, let's appreciate and understand what is the trade facilitation agreement. Controller Anthony did help us with the definition. Basically, transparency, ease of doing business, or ease of clearing goods either into or out of the country. Now, let's look at target setting. What is and what are the benchmark or parameters the Nigerian Customs Service measured itself as far as transparency and speed with which importers and exporters handle their items? Today, I want to export or import an item into the country. Kingsley, Kirian, fellow discussant, and fellow Nigerians, in a typical day, you will go to a port or from the comfort of your office trying to key into the server of the Nigerian custom. It is down. Sometimes the ports don't have electricity. Sometimes the ports, they do have the electricity, yet there is no network. This is a shame, to say the least. Now, you want speed, yet the technology for which we are trying to leverage on is not effective, is not efficient, and we want trade facilitation. The WTO that brought about trade facilitation agreement, for which Nigeria signed into in 2017, till today, if the customs were to be fair and equitable to us and to themselves, they should assess where were we before, where have we reached till date, what are the bottlenecks. Gentlemen, how much will it cost us, for example, to have solar panels that will supply electricity in each port, so that there couldn't be and there shouldn't be and there must not be epileptic power supply to the customs? Yes, Controller Anthony did say good old days when I was active in importation and export, we used to pass through the long room, no longer long room. But yes, there is no long room as a long room where you take one document, a document from one table to another, but now the room is probably even longer. Why? Because it is no longer even as short as it should be or it was when we were dealing with long room, because you have all the custom officers seated in one room and you move from one table to another in 3-5 hours. Sometimes, excuse my choice of being frankness, incentivizing them so that you can get your document handled with relative ease. Let me talk about targets. Really, fundamentally, Dr. Ken has touched on that. It is important that the Nigerian custom should have a massive training that will reorientate them, the officers and men, on the strategic direction, instead of a controller in charge of trade facilitation coming on a national television and talking about revenue, revenue, revenue. If you replay the tape, Controller Anthony must have used the word revenue not less than 5-10 times, when he was making his opening remarks. That shouldn't be. Controller Anthony should naturally be talking about how have I been able to make sure that Nigerians that are exporting or importing, I have been able to make it relatively easier for them. The target, as always, either from the executive that would have passed in the budget to the National Assembly for review, or from the National Assembly, or from the custom, system itself, should have a twin side of a coin. What will that twin side be? Number one is how much, trade facilitation have I been able to make? The relative ease, and how much that relativity has brought to increase in volume of business, and how much was that increase in volume of business, dovetailed into increase in revenue. These are the sequence that we should be looking at. Really, maybe, if I may be bold to suggest, what we should be looking at is to have a private sector orientated personalities situated within the custom and handling these trade facilitation decks so that this can be, it can be even more effective. And then finally, on my opening remarks, there is need maybe for the custom to have a dual reporting line, even if it is with a dotted line to the Ministry of Trade. Every day there is a silo kind of reporting line. The custom reports directly to the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Finance is responsibility is managing the economy, fiscal policy, and of course, revenue generation and dispensation. So as long as there is no interface between the Federal Ministry of Trade, Investment, and the custom, we will continue to have challenges as to the implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement. It is indeed a shameful situation to find ourselves the way Femi Boyede has put it, that 21 years after AGOA, the Americans still don't have a signature that we will say this is the signatory of or the signature of the person we will be taking to do this. Come on. How can we possibly be claiming to be giant of Africa, largest economy, and with all the things that we are supposed to be exporting and we still cannot export? I think the earlier we put our house in order, the better.
All right. Thank you for your postulations. As a matter of fact, he has touched a number of issues, and we're going to bring in Anthony Ayalogo here, Controller, Facilitation and Preferential Trade of the Customs Service. He has actually hit the nail on the head with respect to some of the issues he raised. He talked about training of your men, sharp practices, to enable facilitation of trade by officers. Now, is there any internal policy failure, in Customs Service?
Well, most of these the comments from our colleagues online were not very correct. I think not very correct. First of all, trade facilitation is about facilitation of legitimate trade, and that is one. And number two, apart from, just like Ken Oko has said, we should understand this. Nigeria runs a multi-agency process in import and export, as like other developed countries that have a customs border patrol that incorporates other agencies' functions in them. So when we talk about time and all this, we talk about what are the times that are allocated to customs process and what are the times that are allocated to other processes. Time on period is about two start and stop. In Nigeria, in Nigeria Customs, we try as much as possible within that process to make sure that we introduce everything that will make it fast. And again, like I said, it's not only, you talked about collection of revenue. That's not only what we do. I told you about collection, control, and collations. So this is talking about the controls. We have collected money, but of course we have tried as much as possible to make sure our process is easy for people to pay, not because we have made it complex. We have also stopped security threats by arms and ammunition being imported into the country by making sure that our control factors are very strong. And we have also gotten statistics for government so that whatever you project, you have a base to do that. This is very important. And you cannot do without this tray. But also talking about facilitation of trainings, we have embarked on a lot of trainings. And the trainings that we have here, we have one of the best, when I say one of the best custom regional training centers in Africa. And then we have made sure that our officers are trained. But the problem here is running this multi-agency process. You see, you have, when you move in a group, the fastest you can go is the fastest speed of the slowest person. You see, when we move, we'll talk about all these innovations in customs, the NIS2 and other innovations that we have put in. It will not work if other people are not on it. We are now a paperless. You do your declaration online, so we don't use paper. We talked about reducing the paperwork. We have removed it. But we cannot totally remove it because sometimes our sister agencies that work in this process don't have the facility to connect to our digital process. So there should be printout of certain things for them to make approvals on them. And this is exactly where the problem is. Like the Controller General always says, and also advises and directs, we want to make uncompliance impossible. It's not about just cutting the uncompliant officer or the uncompliant trader. It's about making it impossible. And that is why innovations is about making sure that role that leads to leakage in revenue it doesn't exist. Yesterday, we ran live the VIN valuation platform. What that means is for you to get your vehicle, you don't need to go to any custom officer to give you a value. You tag in your VIN number, and the value of your car comes to you. If you put in a lower value, it will tell you, we know this vehicle, and this is the value of this vehicle. So there's no interface with any officer to say he's giving you a higher value or a lower value. If you go to every port, it comes the same. The system is the same in everywhere. Again, this is about making that corruption or that contact impossible. People have to move in that way. It is on that essence that we collect more revenue. We don't collect revenue by subverting trade facilitation. We collect revenue, we maximize our revenue collections by automating our process, making leakages impossible. And by so doing, we increase. So letting people saying that trade facilitation has undermined, the collection of duty has undermined trade facilitation is very wrong. Now, we talk about AGOA. AGOA, it is not correct that many years after AGOA has come in place, that you don't have a customs signatory. That is not true. It's my office. The last stamp we sent out was in 2018. And right now, we are working with the U.S. Embassy to also, get the new stamps to them and also get the signatories. We do that every time. With the National Export Promotion Council, just last 2 months, we had an AGOA workshop in Lagos where we brought out all exporters, knew their problem, and we're also signing an SLA with the NEPC on what roles they will play in this preferential trade arrangement. And this is exactly what we're doing. It's all working behind to ensure that this is seamless. Now, what we're saying is this. Where the problem comes is what Ken Okoha has just invited. Why is it customs? I believe that the topic should be better put as customs, the lead agency in trade facilitation, not customs in customs facilitation, because for the process in Nigeria, we are the lead agencies. We have done all what it takes to make sure that speed is at the right pace. We have also projected to the future. Look at what is going to be in future that we don't have. The custom already in place. An e-customs project is gotten more than $3 billion in order to make sure that we come to that level. But we cannot all go it alone without other agencies coming in. Again, you look at one of the Mercato projects talks about time release study, checking your time. My office, one of the major things I do is to check time. The timing has been incorporated into our customs report. So every day I know the fastest declaration and the lowest one. It's done directly. I can see it on my phone. I can call and see what is happening. I want to tell you, within the last 2 months, we have the fastest process in Nigerian customs. We have the fastest process. We have already gotten the scanners already working, but already we are moving. When the scanners start coming, you can see the speed will increase. What my office does is purely to do two things: reduce the time in process and reduce the cost in process. And when we're able to do that, then we have done what we're doing. It's not about reducing the revenue collection. We should do that because that's a mandate from government. We must give that government the money it needs. We must control the process to make sure that our industries are growing. We must also make sure that the Nigeria is secure by not allowing dangerous things to come into the country. And so these are all what we do, but as we do them, we also ensure that we also get our revenues right. And then it's like if everybody, our colleague from
Canada.
Well, that's one. It's by Zoom. That's Femi Boyede.
Femi said.
Shuaibu Idris in Sokoto.
Yes, Femi. I'm talking about Femi. Femi talked about trade facilitation being the utmost. I do not want it to be like that. We have to do the both of them. We have to facilitate trade, and we have to make sure we regulate. Regulation is the most important thing. What custom is there to regulate. But when people are regulated, when people are bringing in the raw materials into this country and they are not bringing the finished product, our revenue will actually fall. But that's exactly what we're going. As long as they insist that they bring in finished product, we collect the right duty from them. Because custom duty is not like every other tax. It is actually a penalty for not abiding with the economic policy of the country. Okay. The economic policy of the country is that you should not import finished goods. So if you do that, you pay a penalty. And that penalty is custom duty. So the more Nigerians refuse to bring in raw materials and bring in finished goods, the more customs collect. And so when we are there, the only thing they can do is that the trade will have to change. If the trade changes and more raw materials are bringing in, then the custom revenue will actually fall. Okay. But duties will still be on that.
All right. Thank you very much, Controller Ayalogo. We'll give you the opportunity to respond to the raft of issues raised by the other guests. We're going to have to take a short break now. When we return, we continue with the conversation.
COVID-19, that is the black swan of the century, has actually hit the whole world very hard, even the strongest of economies. And Nigeria was not spared. But due to the proactive stance and steps that the president has taken, we've been able to come out quickly. The president has consistently said we must invest in infrastructure. Even as we're investing in human capital, that we must invest in infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, that is what will bring about a sustainable economic growth. So the president has given us our directive. He has said you must make sure you pay salaries and pay pensions, but you also make sure that the critical projects of roads, railway, airports, bridges, major infrastructure that are meant to drive the growth of the economy, that we consistently invest in them, even if we have to continue to borrow to do so.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youths, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria, pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have all our four guests with us. Back to Femi Boyede. Femi Boyede, of course, you listened to the rebuttal by Comptroller Ayalogo with regard to some of the points that you highlighted. You may wish to respond to them, but more critically, how can we enhance the role of the Customs Service as a trade facilitator?
Thank you very much. It's not Femi versus Customs, but I would like to speak to that in a more general way. I must say it, I'm privileged to have been in the Nigerian business environment, and I am also privileged to now be settled in another business environment. So I'm trying to talk to the difference in cultures and how we address issues. I have noticed, with due respect, that my country of origin still does aluta. This is not just Nigerian Customs Service. It is right from the very top. Whenever something is said about what Nigeria needs to improve on, then we spend endless energy, time, and millions of dollars to challenge anybody for daring to point out our areas of deficiency, rather than learn from that and explore the lessons that need to be learned. I think until we stop being defensive and start going out to fora to actually pick lessons and use them to address as a country. Now, I'm not talking about a service, then we are probably not going to hit the starting blocks yet. Having said that, we do appreciate, I acknowledge the giant strides. We are no longer where we used to be, that the Nigerian Customs Service has taken. The single window is there, but my colleague from Sokoto actually asked very pertinent questions. When you have the single window, when you have a technology, supposed to be a technology-driven operation, and if you look at the World Customs Organization's expectations of an efficient customs service, it is one that is technology driven. If you look at the disruption in supply chain globally, especially as a result of a COVID pandemic, you will understand that customs services have gone beyond the several roadblocks that we have. And just like somebody said earlier, if you are chasing people in country, what happened initially at the entry border post? That's another question that the World Customs Organizations has set is a challenge to ensure the integrity of the customs operations. Again, customs, just like country policing, should now go to working based on intelligence. It's a matter of using the latest technologies to gather intelligence about if the idea is to actually enforce, to police, to regulate, to monitor. How much information do we have? How do we curb the activities of smugglers? I think part of the research we did when I was still a special advisor on trade to the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, we did recognize, I think I was also an assistant secretary at some point to the Presidential Committee on the Revival of Nigeria's Textile Industries, that the death of the Nigerian textile sector as of today was not just a failure of policy, it was more like a failure of the enforcing activities of our services to curb the activities of smugglers that enable China and Bangladesh and Taiwan to dump their textile products onto Nigeria. All of these are areas that I think they are learning points. There are things that Nigeria Customs Service needs to do and to do more efficiently. We have, let me just use this as one of the key recommendations of the now unaccomplished trade policy review in 2007. One of our recommendations then was the introduction and establishment and implementation of the authorized trader system. I'm glad to note that now the Nigerian Customs Service operates a fast-track clearing process where certain companies based on their level of compliance. But again, we need to take this up just a notch further. I have always questioned the existence of a presidential committee on trade malpractice when we have not set up a trade practice environment. What is the trade practice that is acceptable? This is where I agree with the controller that customs as a lead trade facilitator should take this bull by the horns. Establish what is it that I will accept. So when you have a trade practice that is acceptable by Nigeria, then you can bring in the Presidential Committee on Trade Malpractice or even make it a full department in Nigeria Customs Service to now chase after people who are not complying with the trade practice. Then you can have an efficient trade malpractice monitoring system. There are so many of these. Well, how far today, how easy is it for exports to take place? I put it out there that the reason why we have port congestion is not just because of the inefficient infrastructure at the ports, it's also because of the level of speed and efficiency of the clearing system itself. So whether it is long room or short room or no room, the truth still remains that the time it takes to clear a container in Nigeria is probably one of the longest in the world, whether it is for export or for import. And until the imports have been cleared, the exports cannot get into the port. That's my own layman's explanation of what brings port congestion. These are areas that Nigeria Customs Service should be looking at to actually ensure that there is ease of doing trade. We have I think it's a presidential initiative on ease of doing business. I have canvassed for a presidential committee, a presidential initiative on ease of doing exports. I think it is now time to come to also advocate for ease of trade facilitation. Let it be led by Customs Service or by any of the other agencies listed by my president, Ken. It doesn't matter who takes the lead. There has to be a lead anyway. There are so many trade support institutions as far back as 2003 or something. I can't remember whether it was
Mr.
2001.
Femi Boyede, we have to pause you here at the moment because time is not on our side. And, well, we hope that futuristically we may return to this very topic. But for now, let's come back to our studio and get Dr. Ukoha. Well, we are on remediations now. Many points have been highlighted by all of you here. But the key question is, how can Nigeria Customs Service improve in a nutshell?
Thank you. Number one, we need to get the trade policy that the customs will need to implement. Without a trade policy that shows the tentacles of the implementation, our industrialization strategy incorporated therein, then they'll be chasing shadows. And whatever they are doing would be looking like going for money, revenue collection. Number two, I think we need to begin to interrogate the efficiency or otherwise, or the plausibility or otherwise of the customs being under the Federal Ministry of Finance. Does it promote some psychological impact on the custom that says custom must be revenue since it is under finance?
This is under the Ministry of Finance. Yeah.
We need to interrogate a bit more. There's no time now, but I would have told you many things in that direction. Mm-hmm. Number three, I think we also need to look at the issue of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is ongoing. Now, where is the placement of the customs in this regard? And this is an agreement that has been touted to be a goal-getter for Nigeria, a platform for Nigeria's industrialization. And today we are talking about the National Development Strategy, the National Development Plan, rather, and we are looking at 2050 plan. What are the strategies of moving the customs from where they are now as perhaps a revenue collector to a point where they will not only satisfy that particular requirement of being a facilitator, but also a regulator as well as an enforcer? And I think I will conclude by saying that we need to actually look at other issues that are aligned with Articles 8 and 10. That would not permit me to look at what it says. But in a nutshell, Article 8 and 10 talks about simplification and information, as well as issues related to appeal system. And this is one of the reasons why facilitation of trade has been moribund, because it is my word against your word. As an importer or as an exporter and the customs, and they take their decision, no place for appeal and all of that. Thank you.
Ken Ukoha, thanks a lot for the brevity. Shuaibu Idris, sorry, we're coming to you only for the second time. I mean, you all have made loaded points into this conversation. As my colleague Kirian indicated, this is subject matter that we'll have to take on again to provide more leadway into what we need to do to get the customs perform better as a trade facilitator. What are your closing thoughts into this conversation?
Kingsley, fundamentally, let me just assuage the fears of Controller Anthony. There has been significant and noticed positive improvement in the services being rendered by the Nigerian Customs Service. From, say, Dr. Bello Haliru's time till now, there's been significant improvement. So please take it that we note the improvement. Number two, when you say control, collect, and collect, there is no an either incentives to all facilitation of trade. You are collecting, you are controlling, and you are collating. Please look into the possibility of having, how do you help importers, exporters? Number three, when you are benchmarking yourself with last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you may not necessarily be doing justice to the subject matter. Compare yourself with international best practices. Compare yourself, say, with a Singapore or a Malaysian or South African, ports and the clearing process, and say to yourself, am I doing well? Am I doing badly? And how do I improve? Finally, very, very important, Controller Anthony, the custom needs to realize that training is fundamental. And don't just use, your officers and men to train yourselves. Get outsiders, get foreigners, get private sector orientated personalities to come into your training schools. You now have, several training schools in Abuja, in Lagos, in Kano, and name them. And yet, if you are using the same people with the same attitude training those coming, there will not be an attitudinal change. We need a paradigm shift, and that paradigm shift must be from a revenue-orientated generating agency to a trade facilitator. I like what you said, alluding to the fact that your best is only good enough to the leper in your team. You also need to be extending your hands of fellowship to Nigerian Ports Authority and other agencies that are working in sync with you so that trade can be done better. Because when trade is done better, employment will be generated. This issue of poverty will reduce. Issue of insecurity will reduce. Then revenue will come in naturally. These are the sequences that I think the Nigerian Customs should be looking at. For want of time, I will stop here. Once again, Kieran and Kingsley, thank you very much.
So indeed, if I earlier understood Anthony Ayalogo, this issue of collation, controlling, regulation, and collection, they're all elements of trade facilitation, if I understand you. All right. At this point, gentlemen, I'd like to appreciate you for being here this morning. Anthony Ayalogo, Controller, Trade Facilitation and Preferential Trade, Nigeria Customs Service. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Dr. Ken Ukwaha, a regular here on Good Morning Nigeria. We appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Your contributions. Shaibu Idris, Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited. Thank you again for your robust contribution this morning. Femi Boyede, a certified international trade professional and president, Nigeria Trade and Investment Center, Canada Incorporated. We also like to thank you for waking up with us this morning to be on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you indeed. All right, next for us here is a bit of sports. You know, Kingsley, we had
there were some great matches. Inter Milan, that was 2-0, and Lionel Messi, of course, was there with Paris Saint-Germain, triumphing 4-1. They threw now to the last 16.
And Liverpool as well,
Liverpool was good. There are some other great matches afoot later today. That, of course, we do hope that you have time to join us tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kieran Rumayo.